You can now hear Movie Heaven, Movie Hell on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand. Listen anytime, anywhere. Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favourite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment and sports shows. You can also create your own custom playlists. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad and in over 4 million car dashboards. It's on demand and it's on the go. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. You can stream your favourite podcasts from Stitcher. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And please leave us a review and rating on Stitcher. Thank you. Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers who enjoy discussing movies, TV series and related media. And for this special episode, we are delighted to welcome back award-winning writer, podcaster and now film producer, Antony Johnston. So welcome back to the show, Antony.
Hello, it's very good to be here.
You know, very pleased to have you back again. Obviously, some sort of major changes have happened, I guess, in your world since you were last on. In so much as, you know, you now have a movie at the cinema based on a property that you wrote. And am I correct in saying it's been approximately a sort of 10-year journey from concept to cinema for this?
If you mean concept as in the book itself, yes. I first conceived the book in 2008. And so, you know, round about summer 2008 as well. So, and now here we are, summer of 2017 and the movie's out. So yeah, if we go right the way back to the start, it's roughly, 9 years, which is, but saying that, I'm told that, because I was, you know, to me, from my point of view, because this is the first thing I've had option that's actually gone through the whole process. I've had stuff optioned before, but this is the first thing that's gone through the whole process and actually made it through and come out the other side, as it were, as a movie. And from my perspective, that's felt like it took an awful long time. I have now learned from talking to people in the movie industry that actually that's pretty fast. Even 9 years from concept to optioning to making the movie to release is considered to be, you know, that's not bad. That's considered not mega fast, but certainly not slow. And going from considering that it's only 5 years from the publication of the book to the movie release, that is considered to be very fast, which again, to my mind, has been like agonizingly slow. But people in the industry have sort of laughed at me and gone, no, that's really fast.
Well, of course, the movie that we are talking about here, because I realised I didn't mention it in the lead up, is indeed Atomic Blonde, starring Charlize Theron amongst a cast of many other, you know, A-list type actors, which was adapted from the graphic novel The Coldest City. That's correct, right?
That is all correct, yes. Okay,
so I'm sure you've been asked. I know you've had previous interviews about this, but you know, for the benefit of our listeners, could you tell us a little bit about you know, where this all started?
Sure. Well, it started, like I said earlier, in 2008 when I think at that point I'd been a professional writer for about 10 years. And I'd written a variety of stuff. I mean, one of the sort of hallmarks of my career is that I genre hop. You know, I've done horror, romantic comedy, kids stuff, sci-fi, fantasy, you name it. I've even done a Western. But one thing I hadn't done at that point was an out-and-out spy story. And I'm a big fan of spy fiction, especially Cold War spy fiction. I grew up watching James Bond movies and stuff. And, you know, the sort of 60s TV Euro spy shows, my mother loved those, so I grew up watching those as well. I read John le Carré and Ian Fleming, obviously, and also things like Len Deighton. I loved the Sandbaggers TV show, big fan of the genre, and yet I'd never written any. And then in 2006, I believe it was, I was asked by a friend of mine and fellow comics writer Greg Rucka, who had a series called Queen and Country at a publisher, Oni Press, who I had already done a lot of work with. And at that point, I was just starting my post-apocalyptic epic series Wasteland with them, just launching that in 2006. And Greg asked me to, I think it was just before Wasteland, to write an arc of a spin-off series that he did of Queen and Country called Queen and Country Declassified, which dealt with agents' lives before they joined MI6. So I did. I was very flattered to be asked because I love the series. I wrote that, and in the process of writing it, realized that I was having a really good time. And it occurred to me that that was probably because it was the genre that I love, but had never, for some reason, had never thought about writing in before. So I decided that the next major creator-owned thing that I did, original thing that I created for myself, would be a spy thriller. And from there, all the other decisions sort of cascaded out of there. Like I say, I love Cold War spy fiction, so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do a spy thriller, and I'll make it a period piece and set it in the Cold War. Once I decided that, then the decision to set it in Berlin was easy, because it's like, where else is, where better in the Cold War to set a spy story than divided Berlin? And from that, the decision to then, because of my own experiences, to set it at the fall of the wall, because it was this pivotal moment in European history. So all these decisions kind of fell out of that. But the culmination, long story short, too late, is that in 2008, in the summer of 2008, I wrote the script for this graphic novel that became The Coldest City. And then we found an artist, which was Sam Hart, old friend of mine, British artist, but he lives in Brazil, who I knew would do it justice. Sam then set about writing it. And not long after, the Oni Press, who had agreed to publish this book as well, had a partnership with some producers in Hollywood. They had a media arm, basically, and they sat down with Charlize Theron's production company, just a general meeting, and realized, it came out of this conversation, that Charlize was looking for basically something like this. Just happened to be looking for something that we now had. And so we started talks, and they liked it. We sort of sent them, they actually saw I think my original pitch for the book, and then the script for the book, while it was still being drawn. And then in 2010, they basically said, we want to buy this. And then it took another 18 months or so of negotiations and what have you. And in 2012, 3 months before the book was published, we signed an option deal with them, and Denver and Delilah, that is Charlize's production company, basically optioned the book. And then from that point on, it was a case of, okay, well, now let's get, the financing and casting and find a director and get a screenplay and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it all started with me effectively taking 2 months off of regular work in the summer of 2008 to write this book that at the time I really had no idea whether anybody else would want to read. I didn't have a publisher already lined up when I started to write it. I didn't consider it particularly commercial or a very saleable idea, because I wanted to do it in a very specific, particular noirish John le Carré style. Where it's not lighthearted like Bond. It hasn't got loads of action in it, unlike the movie version. It is a very sober and tradecraft focused book full of twists and turns that you have to really pay attention to follow. And I succeeded in that, and I'm very proud of that. But as a result, I thought, well, this isn't going to be very commercial, so I'm just going to write it for my own enjoyment. And then if I can find a publisher, if I can find somebody to publish it, and we can sell a few copies, that'll be great.
Wow. I mean, it really is a story dreams are made of, when you speak to people in our industry, So it was your publisher then that managed to get it in front of Charlize Theron's production company, was it?
Yes. Well, part of the deal, part of their publishing deal is that they represent, for a period of time anyway, after publication, they represent the media rights for books that they publish. It's very common, especially amongst smaller publishers in comics, because frankly there ain't a lot of money in comics, and so it's a way for publishers to mitigate risk, because they're paying us to produce the books, and so in return they want to share in any success it has in other media, which I think is reasonable. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing at all. And that was the case with Coldest City. It was part of that sort of fairly standard publishing deal. And so, yeah, they had, it was part of their slate, as it were, that they took out to talk to production companies about. And yeah, as I say, we got really lucky with the timing throughout the whole thing. Charlize happened to be looking for something like this at the time that we had it. And then we got the right screenwriter. Kurt Jonstedt read the book. He loved the book. And, just happened to be looking for something to be doing after, I think it was after he'd done the second 300 movie. And so he was available and he was really into the material. And then when we came to financing and casting, of course, Mad Max Fury Road turned out to be way more of a hit than anybody could have anticipated, so much more popular than I think anybody would have predicted before it actually opened. And so suddenly everybody wanted to be in Charlize's next action movie. So like I say, the timing in so many aspects just couldn't have been better.
So, Anthony, you've got a producer credit on this. How much input did you have into the film, or is it just a honorary credit?
Well, it's somewhere between the two. I mean, I wasn't on set every day. I can't claim that I was sort of, heavily involved, but they were very gracious about keeping me informed and keeping me involved and letting me see everything, and then taking my notes. So I saw, the screenplay drafts and gave notes on them. I visited the set and sort of gave interviews for the DVD extras. I assume they'll be on a DVD or Blu-ray or whatever they do these days. I then saw the first rough cut of the movie and gave notes on that. And I've been, involved in a lot of the press and publicity stuff and been at the, red carpet events and what have you during the film's release. So, like I say, I won't claim that I was there day to day, literally sat in Video Village the whole time. But I was involved and I was giving feedback and notes, partly because I was the only Brit behind the camera. We have lots of British people in front of the camera, lots of British actors, but I was the only Brit on the other side of the camera. And so part of what I did was keeping an eye out for things, dialogue particularly, that didn't quite sound British. And I don't mean to disparage anybody by this, because I do the same thing when I'm writing Americans, which I do a lot. And I've been doing it for years. And I know that I still occasionally have American characters saying things. And, my friends are like, that we don't actually say that. And it was just the same here. There were a few things where I'm like, British people don't actually use that phrase or don't say this thing in this particular way. So that was quite helpful, actually. That was quite handy that I was there to help them with that.
No, that's cool.
And how are you enjoying the whole sort of red carpet experience?
Oh, well, that's very surreal. But it's much like actually shooting. As a sort of when I visited the set, it was my first experience on a working set. I'd visited sets before, but never actually literally during production, while runners are all running around the place and delivering sides and what have you, and people are shouting, rolling, cut, and all that. So that was very exciting for about half an hour. And then after, and obviously I met, all the principals and stuff there, and that was lovely throughout. But in terms of actually being on the set, for anybody who's never done it, and I'm sure you guys will know this, after the initial sort of shine wears off, you realize it's a really dull place to be. If you don't have a job on that set, and all you can do is sit in Video Village and stick your headphones on when the runner shouts rolling, and then they shoot for 30 seconds and then they stop for 10 minutes to reset, and you're just like, my God, this is so dull.
Hurry up and wait.
Right, totally. That's what the Rolling Stones always said about touring. You know, it was like 99% was just sitting around doing nothing and waiting for that 1% of time you're actually on stage. And the red carpet stuff has been a bit like that. The first, 30 minutes of it, the first proper one I did was Berlin. Was amazing and very exciting. And, I was the adrenaline's flowing. There's video of me being interviewed on the German live stream somewhere on YouTube. And if you watch it, I think you can tell that I'm sort of trying to hold back the adrenaline rush, and trying to sort of talk in a sensible fashion and not sound like a flailing idiot, which I think I mostly did, But again, after that initial 30 minutes, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, so this is, once you start seeing everything behind the scenes and you see the things that you don't see when you're watching it at home on the TV, the things that are out of shot of the cameras, and you start to see how the sausage is made, as it were. Again, it becomes a bit, I won't say dull. I mean, I don't think anybody could say red carpet's dull, but it's repetitive, very repetitive. And and just kind of you very quickly become acclimatized to this sort of thing. So by the time I was doing my fifth interview down the line at the LA premiere, sort of towards the end of the queue, as it were, I'm so jaded now.
Well, Berlin couldn't have been, more appropriate, could it, for your first red carpet experience for this film?
It was fantastic. Yeah. No, it was great. And the Berlin premiere actually, in some ways, was a bigger deal than the LA premiere in terms of the crowd and the media sort of buzz around it. Obviously not so much in the American press, but just in terms of literally how many people were there, and the press scrum. It was really quite extraordinary. The Berliners really, welcomed us.
I recently worked with a friend of ours called Claire Breno, who does premiere scene, and I was at a red carpet event for Detroit, and I was actually, we were filming interviews, and so that was the first time that I had actually sort of participated in a red carpet event, had been there for the whole thing. And it was kind of interesting to watch this whole sort of push and pull that goes on between having to do the press, having to get the photographs, and also signing autographs with the fans. And it was this really, it's like a scrum, isn't it?
It really is. And I should say, everybody, sort of was wonderful, and most of these people, unlike me, have done it many, many times before. But I have to say that Charlize, what a pro on the red carpet, where she does the whole in Berlin anyway, where she did the crowd first, signing in selfies and all that sort of thing, which I suppose dates back to when Tom Cruise used to grab people's cell phones and call their mother and what have you. He sort of really perfected that, didn't he? And she did the whole crowd signing photographs, selfies. Then she did, and people were snapping a photo during that time, but then she did the actual, okay, now pose for the press photos, and then she did on-camera interviews while other people were then getting out of cars and sort of going about their business. So it was there was a push and pull, but with her anyway, not so much with the rest of us, but with Charlize, because obviously she's such a huge star, it was quite regimented in that sense, and you get the sense that she is very much a pro and a kind of a veteran at this sort of thing.
Yeah, well, of course, and this is very much a passion project for Charlize anyway, right? You can sort of tell, I think, when you see the film, that how invested she was in it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, literally in terms of, sort of in the fact that it was her production company was behind the whole thing. But also, she clearly believed in it. Part of the reason that she wanted to do it was because she related to the character of Lorraine in the book and really wanted to bring her alive. And she's also been, again, a real pro in terms of, she really put herself out there in terms of promoting the movie. Charlize has done just about everything humanly possible over the course of the last 3 months to promote Atomic Blonde. I don't think there's anything she could have done that she hasn't in terms of media and press coverage. She's really worked tirelessly to promote it. Part of that is because, as I say, obviously she has a literal investment in it, but also because, yes, it was a passion project for her. It's something that she had wanted to do for a long time, and that she wanted to be a success, to not necessarily prove something. I think that's the wrong phrase to use, but to, you know, just sort of advance this kind of movie and, you know, help lead the way.
No, absolutely. And hey, when she talks, we listen, you know, so it's
absolutely, yeah.
it's all good. So let's dig into some of the, if you like, then some of the differences between the film and
sure.
and your material. And I guess the best place to start is actually with the title. So what are your thoughts on the actual title, Atomic Blonde?
I don't mind it because it does a better job for what they wanted the title to do. And I'm not just saying that to be diplomatic. Like, they had very specific aims with the title. And remember that the movie was called The Coldest City right up until, I'm trying to think, it was like maybe sort of February or March of this year, you know, really quite close to release. But then when marketing looked at it, their main concern was that they wanted the movie to tell people, they wanted the title to tell people that the movie was about Charlize, was about her character. And The Coldest City obviously does not do that. And there were all sorts of suggestions bandied around and alternatives, many of which I would have been a lot less happy about than with Atomic Blonde, let me tell you. And we settled on, it came down to, you know, sort of a battle between those two. And it was simply that Atomic Blonde was better received by the focus groups and the test audiences. You know, they did all this research and Atomic Blonde came out on top. And so you can't argue with the numbers.
No, you've got to listen to that stuff, haven't you? For sure. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Right, you have to trust
and the other
people know what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that sort of instantly struck me with the film is, I mean, I love the fact that it kind of deals with, we have lots of cinema that deals with sort of a dystopian future and stuff. But what I kind of liked about this is it sort of deals, it's sort of set in a dystopian past almost. But obviously Sam Hart's artwork in the graphic novel is you know, renowned and famous for being black and white. Okay, but obviously this film is extremely colourful, and you know, did almost have, it has got a graphic novel feel to it, but more of a sort of colour graphic novel, if that makes sense. You know, what's your, I'm sure Sam has thoughts on that, but I mean, what was your thoughts, bearing in mind that a lot of movies, including Mad Max Fury Road, by the way, are being sort of re-released in black and white or noir versions now.
Yeah, the black and chrome edition, isn't it?
Exactly.
I don't think that will happen with this, partly because I don't want to speak for Sam, but obviously having, you know, been through the whole process with him, I know that he is, like me, very, very happy with the movie. And the thing is, you can't, I mean, you could make a black and white movie nowadays, but you are immediately restricting your audience, because this was made to be a mainstream movie. You know, this was not made to be, you know, a sort of little art house cult classic thing that only discerning viewers will go and watch. You know, it was made to be a mainstream action movie. And if you make that in black and white, you know, you will financially fail. It's that simple. It's one thing to go back and release a black and white version of an already successful color movie, but to actually open in black and white is, you know, pretty much commercial suicide. So that was never on the cards. And I don't think any of us expected that it would be. But what was great was when Dave came on board. Well, at the time it was Chad Stahelski and Dave Leitch, you know, the guys behind 8711 and co-directed John Wick. And they were going to co-direct The Coldest City as well. But then John Wick 2 scheduling clashed, and they decided to take one project each. Chad stayed with John Wick and Dave took on Coldest City. And when and I don't know whether this was the two of them together or whether it was just Dave, because I've only heard Dave talk about it, but basically he, or possibly they, but I'll say he, looked at it and said, okay, well, we can't do that. We can't make a black and white, you know, noirish movie. However, what if, given that this was the 80s, a decade renowned for like neon and bright colors, what if we made a noir that instead of being really cool and desaturated, or even said we oversaturated it and filled it with really oversaturated neon bright colors, and, you know, really just filled the screen with color? Could you still make a film that feels like a noir with that sort of visual style and really overload people's senses? And the answer, as we now know, is yes, you can do that, and you'll get a really, really great looking movie out as a result of it. You know, if you're Dave and you have Jonathan Saylor as your cinematographer, which surely helps. So, you know, it was, like I say, making a black and white movie was never really on the cards. So I like that. But I like that it was a process that went through thought. And I like that Dave said, okay, we can't do that, but what can we do that will still make it really visually distinctive? And as I say, I think they absolutely succeeded in that, because it looks like no other movie on release today. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, making the colours pop as opposed to desaturating them was one of the really sort of striking things about this was the use of colour in the film. And you're absolutely right. I know that you have to release a film in colour. It's just that it seems to be a bit of a vogue, I hate to say almost like gimmick at the moment, that you know, they did it with Mad Max, but they've also done it with the recent Logan film as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. Right.
Yeah, there's one called Logan Noir now, which is they've done it for the home video release, or the you know, the Blu-ray release, which you know, I think it's a good thing if you've got the option. But yeah, it just seems to be a little bit of a, you know, cinema's always looking for that sort of next gimmick, whether it's 3D or whatever. It seems to be to re-release films that were colour in black and white at the moment. For some
if they
reason.
if they can get us to buy that disc again, they will. You know,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And in terms of the casting itself, I mean, what are your thoughts on the sort of, because this really has got an impressive cast of names.
Oh, it's amazing! Yeah.
What are your thoughts of those compared to their like comic counterparts?
Well, the only two characters that are really sort of, I was going to say controversial. Again, that's overstating it. It's not really controversial, but the only two characters that stand out, if you like, in that sense, are James McAvoy playing David Percival, because Percival in the book is a middle-aged, overweight, mustachioed, misogynist, old establishment dinosaur. And obviously, you know, he's James McAvoy is none of those things. So, you know, physically, he is very, very different. And, you know, he's a lot younger than the character in the books. However, the core of his character is still there. He is a misogynist dirtbag. You know, he is kind of obstructing her investigation at every turn because he's selfish and he wants to just like, he's grown to love his position in Berlin and doesn't want to jeopardize it. So, you know, the core of the character is still there. James just portrays him in a very different way, but in a way that, you know, I really enjoyed. I thought was highly entertaining. And then, of course, the big one that everybody talks about is recasting. In the book, the French agent's name is Pierre. Pierre Lassalle, obviously with that name, a man. And in the movie, the French agent is played by Sophia Boutella as Delphine Lassalle. And in the book, I mean, a lot of people who haven't read the comic, but know that her character had this gender change, assume that they don't sleep together in the book as a result, and that the love affair is completely made. That's not true. They do sleep together in the book. It's a little more perfunctory, shall we say, in the book. And it is, you know, is a heterosexual coupling, obviously, between Lorraine and Pierre. Whereas in the movie, it's Lorraine and Delphine, and it's anything but heterosexual. But I, contrary to what some people expected, I was all in favor of it when the moment, because that was right in, even before Sophia was cast, that was in the very first draft of Kurt's script. And I gather that he had a discussion with Charlize about it before he wrote it. And I was all for it. I thought it was a great idea, partly to get another woman on screen, because otherwise it would have been a complete sausage fest. And that is in the book as well. And I will hold my hand up to that. But that's partly because, I was trying to be somewhat realistic. And part of the book is about what it's like for Lorraine being a woman, being constantly underestimated as a woman in this man's world of 1980s espionage in Berlin. So, it is a sausage fest in the book. I liked the idea of being able to get another woman on screen, in a sort of logical fashion. And I absolutely have no problems with the character being visibly LGBT as a result. That was, that's not even something that to me is controversial, because, who's to say that she isn't in the books? My lips are sealed. So those are the two big differences in character that most people have picked up on. But both of them, like I say, I was really happy with, mainly because they worked in the movie. And I said this before, and I've said this many times. My mantra throughout was, look, I wrote the best graphic novel I could. Now it's up to you guys to make the best movie you can. And if that means changing a few things because it'll work better in the medium of film, then go for it and do it, because making a great movie is more important to me than being slavishly faithful to the book. Because like I say, the book's already there. The book's not going anywhere. It still exists. So I'm not precious about that sort of thing.
Yeah. We like those changes anyway.
Yeah, well, and so did I, as I say. Yeah.
And in terms of the actual narrative, obviously, you I think you've mentioned before you were somewhat influenced by the usual suspects, and you've got that sort of framing device to the movie. I mean, was that always there, or is that something that sort of changed in the edit of the film?
Oh no, that was always there, because that's how the graphic novel is structured as well. Yeah, no, the screenplay was written to incorporate that same, sort of after the event flashback structure. Because and that was like as you correctly said, I again hold my hand up and say that was entirely influenced by The Usual Suspects, because that is one of my all-time favorite movies, and it just seemed to fit for the sort of story we're telling, because it increases the sense of not knowing who to trust, because some of the things that Lorraine says are at odds with things that that are coming out in the debrief. So that's all part of the the mixed up nature of it, and so that the reader doesn't know who to trust. Not just the characters, but also the reader is like, well, hang on a second, that doesn't match up. And so a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that made it through to the movie for the same reasons, so that we don't know who we can trust, because some of the things that Lorraine says are clearly not what we're being shown on film.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And what about, I mean, you mentioned, some of the sort of Le Carré-esque influences and whatever on this. But the actual film that we've ended up with, Atomic Blonde, is quite a sort of glossy, heightened type of experience. And what's your thoughts on that? I mean, is it something that you said obviously when you were writing the graphic novel you were sort of aiming for this sort of almost gritty reality of everything, whereas the movie itself and the action in the movie and obviously the fact that you've got quite good looking actors in all of the roles and stuff, it's a bit more of a sort of glossy, heightened experience. Is that a fair comment, or have I missed the point slightly there?
No, I'd say that's fair. It's kind of hyper real, yeah. But that was how they wanted to make the movie. Charlize always wanted to make this an action movie. She wanted to have more action than was in the book, and so that's what we got. And Kurt's first screenplay actually had way more action and sort of bigger action than what we wound up with. He actually kind of, there were some really, massive mega budget action set pieces in that first screenplay, in that first draft. And we all looked at it and went, yeah, that's, some of this is probably going a bit too far, actually. Let's wind it in a bit. But that was valuable because then you know where the line is. But there was always going to be more action. And once you have that sort of movie action in a story, it immediately becomes heightened, because the reality is most of us could take maybe 2 punches and then we'd fall over. You can't, even the most cursory action movie these days has effectively, unrealistic stroke superhuman fight scenes in it. That's just what we've come to expect from action cinema. And that's fine. And I'm a big fan of many movies that fall under that category anyway, including the John Wick movies. So,
yeah.
Once we knew it was going to have lots of action, we were like, okay, well, then it's not going to be as realistic as the book. And then, of course, when Chad and Dave came on board, even more so, then we were like, oh, okay, right, now we're really going to ramp up this action. But like I say, that was part of the progression of making the movie. And again, I am a big believer that you mustn't feel because remember, I write adaptations myself. I write graphic novel adaptations of books and screenplays and short stories and what have you. And you mustn't feel hidebound to slavishly follow the source material if it's not working. There are some things where you know your own medium that you're working in. You come to an element and you think that's just not going to work in this new medium into which I'm adapting. And so you have to make a change. And if part of that means, going away from realism towards this hyper-real action movie style, well, does it serve the movie? If it does, if it makes it a better movie, then go for it. And that's exactly what we did. And like I say, so I have no qualm or problem with that because they are two different entities. They share the same basic story and structure, but in terms of their feel and tone and the amount of action and what have you, they are two very different things. And I'm fine with that.
And Charlize sells it so well anyway. So,
she's so good at it. Helped by the fact that, by the way, if people have never seen her in real life, she is an Amazon. Like she is, look at the photos from the Berlin premiere. It's hilarious. She is even in, she's in heels, fine. But even, bearing that in mind, she is so much taller than all of us. And it cracks me up when I have seen people on the internet saying, well, it's so unrealistic that a puny woman like Charlize is shown kicking a couple of guys' ass. And I'm like, have you seen her? She could kick every single one of us down the stairs.
Absolutely. I've had the pleasure to meet Charlize before, and yes, she is tall and massively stunning and striking. In person.
Fit.
So,
she is ripped. She worked out and practiced so hard for this movie in terms of just physical practice. It was incredible.
Anthony, when was the decision made to have there's like bruises and scars on her? Because as we know with most action films, usually they'll go into a fight and then they come out and they might have a bruise that's sort of gone by the next scene.
I think that's a combination of a number of things. Firstly, it was in the screenplay right from the first draft. Kurt had that opening scene where she gets out of the bath and she's covered in, bruises and she's battered and what have you. So it was always there in the script. Now, of course, as we know, that doesn't necessarily mean it will make it to film. However, I think action films have been moving in this direction for a while, which helps the general feeling of it's okay to show the hero getting a bit beaten up and battered, because it is a bit more realistic. And then finally, Chad and Dave and their style of filmmaking and, Dave's focus on, showing the trials of going through this kind of physical exercise in this kind of physical combat. So I think all three of those things came together. And then, of course, finally, Charlize's willingness to do that and to not have completely flawless, unblemished, uncut, unbruised skin throughout the entire thing, and to show the hell that Lorraine has been through. I know that she was very much in favor of that. She liked that idea and she liked that about the character. So I don't think there was ever a question that we weren't going to do that. It was just a question of to what extent. And as it happened, we went, to a very large extent.
And obviously, I'm assuming in terms of feedback and success, it's been out here a couple of weeks now in the UK, but it's doing pretty well, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's not, I don't think, I think the only place we were number one on opening weekend, funnily enough, was Russia, of all places. So, it's not blowing the barn doors off, but already, I believe, made more money in the US domestically than the first John Wick movie, which is good. I think we're just shy of 75 million worldwide at time of recording. And it's still yet to open in a couple of big markets like Germany, which I think is this weekend, and Japan, which is next month. So, yeah, it's doing okay. It's doing pretty much as forecast, basically. It's not exceeding predictions, but it's not underperforming either. And so I think everybody is happy with its performance. Certainly, there is still talk of, making more. Nothing's official yet. This isn't a scoop. This isn't breaking news. But there is talk of doing at least one more movie, at least one sequel. And that talk hasn't diminished. So the box office is, it's doing fine. And more importantly, critically, it's doing pretty well. I think we're at 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's divided critics a little, but the ones who get it really get it. Like you read a review, and I can tell, now within a few sentences of reading a review, whether or not this reviewer gets what we were going for. And, certainly you can argue about how much we succeeded in terms of what we were all aiming for. But if you get it, then this is a movie for you. And there is clearly a certain breed of critic out there who, for whom this movie does not appeal, and they don't quite get what we were going for, and that's fine. But the ones who do get it really get it and really get into it, and I really appreciate that.
Ah, so we could see Atomic Blonde to The Coldest Winter, possibly, yeah?
Well, not The Coldest Winter, because The Coldest Winter is actually a flashback story about James McAvoy's character.
Oh, okay, my bad. I thought that was a sequel. Sorry.
It's the second book in the series, but it's a prequel.
Okay, it's a prequel.
I am, however, working on the third book in the series at the moment, which does bring the focus back to Lorraine, Charlize's character. So, like I say, I have nothing to announce. Nothing's been, we haven't even sort of had talks about that sort of thing. But who knows? Keep your fingers crossed.
And has Hollywood? Yeah, and has Hollywood been knocking on the door?
Yes. I have been. It's been very good in terms of sort of opening doors for me, if you like. After the premiere in LA, I spent a couple of weeks out there having meetings and what have you. And I'm now in talks with a few people about a few things, and that's really all I'm allowed to say.
Fair enough. That's all anybody's allowed to say when they're in talks and stuff.
Indeed, yeah. But yes, it's absolutely opened doors for both me and Sam. It's been wonderful. So yeah, we really couldn't have hoped for more and better opportunities, really.
No, we're really happy for you, and it's really great to have a success story like this, come on our podcast. So we really appreciate you coming back to tell us more about this, and hope you stay in touch, and wish you well with those projects moving forward, because it really is this journey. From this concept to the big screen that you've got here is the sort of thing that myself, Simon, and many of our peers and colleagues, only dream of. So well done indeed.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So, Anthony, where can people find out about your work and, of course, your podcast?
Well, you can find me by because my name is slightly unusually spelled. You can basically find me just by typing me into Google, as long as you spell it correctly, because I am able to snatch up domain names and social media accounts with my real name. So my name is Antony Johnston, and that's spelt ANTONY JOHNSTON. So there's no H in Anthony, and there is a T in Johnston. ANTONY JOHNSTON. And if you search for that, or if you just put that into into Twitter, into Facebook, or just as a .com, you will find me in my websites and my social media accounts.
I don't know how anyone can make that mistake, Anthony, you know.
Honestly, I've said this before. If I have one regret in my career, it's that when I was starting, I didn't choose a pseudonym, a nom de plume that Americans could spell more easily without misspelling it all the time. Honestly, it's been a millstone around my neck.
Join the club. People always misspell my surname.
I'm sure, yeah.
And you can imagine the nightmares I have. So yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I know that time is precious, and you agreed at the beginning you could probably give us about 45 minutes. So we really appreciate you sparing the time to have a chat with us about this. I mean, we enjoyed the film. We're really excited about it, and really excited to hear more about what you're doing and stuff. So please do indeed stay in touch, and we hope to have you on again when we're chatting about another subject. To actually, talking of which, you mentioned that you genre hop quite a bit. Without putting you too much on the spot, can I ask what is your favourite genre, would you say?
Oh, that's like asking me who's my child. I mean, that's I've probably now ironically done more work in the spy genre than any other, because obviously there's the two Coldest books. I do another series, a more light-hearted sort of James Bond-like series called Codename Babushka at Image Comics, and I have just written a spy novel, hopefully the first in a series. So ironically, given that I sort of came to it a bit late, that's now probably my most written genre. But like I say, I've also written fantasy, sci-fi, crime, rom-coms, westerns, horror. I wrote loads of horror when I was starting out. For a while I was known as the horror guy, and that's partly why I genre hopped, because I didn't want to be known as a particular, the horror guy or the sci-fi guy or the fantasy guy. That's never been something I desired. So I deliberately hopped around a bit to make sure that people realized I wasn't just somebody who wrote one particular genre. So I can't honestly say I have a favorite. But yeah, as I say, ironically, I am now probably going to be known as an espionage writer forevermore.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, you're like us guys. You like loads of different stuff, and that's what
exactly. Yeah.
So, sort of wrapping up the episode. So, Keith, where can we find your work?
Okay, if you go to YouTube and put in British Eyles, and that's spelled EYLES, as in my last name, you can see some short films on there that I've written, produced, and directed. And for any other credits, just put my name into IMDb.
And as always, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. You can listen to this podcast on that site, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and all good podcast providers. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And if you're on iTunes or Stitcher, please leave us a review and a rating. It all helps. So that just leaves me to thank our guest, Antony Johnston, for coming on.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And I hope that you, the listener, join us again for the next episode of Movie Heaven, Movie Hell.